This is Rudy Giuliani, and I'm back with another episode of Rudy's Common Sense. And today, applying common sense to this is going to be a struggle. It's what shall we call it? The conglomeration of Biden spending bills. Let's call it program. Some done, some proposed, all of it way beyond the scope of our economy. It's a break the bank set of proposals. However, it's been analyzed many different ways. I'm not sure how many people have read it, but this wild Sanders-Biden spending spree, which spreads over several different bills of large magnitude, has several ulterior motives that are necessary to identify before we can start to understand it and raise the most significant question that hasn't been raised yet. One of the ulterior motives is to make America even more dependent than it is now. Well, it's hard to know exactly how dependent we are. You might look at it from the point of view of who paid no taxes last year. 61% of the American people paid no federal income taxes. Doesn't mean they didn't pay any taxes. They may have paid state taxes. They probably paid sales taxes, but they paid no federal income tax. You know, looking at it the other way, virtually all the income tax is paid by, almost all of it is paid by 10% of the citizens, and the big share of it is paid by 1%. And just in case you think, they're not paying their fair share, let's take the 1%. The 1% accounts for about 21% of the income earned in the United States, but it pays 41% of the taxes. So that's a pretty darn fair share, but not enough for Biden. He wants to take more from, the only place he can take it, the people who are working. A lot of people aren't. Now, that 61% that paid no taxes last year was a little high because of the pandemic, but it normally is almost 50%. So a lot of people in this country don't care very much if you want to raise taxes, no matter how high you want to raise, because they don't pay them. So I would say the best description we can give of the bill that is the most controversial, the $3.5 trillion expenditure, I would call it Biden's Make America Dependent bill, because that's really the main theme of the bill, to move people to dependency, as many as possible. Number one, they create a strong Democratic base, and they're losing a lot of their base all over the country. With Biden's approval numbers going into the toilet, I mean, they're going to have to get somebody to vote for them, or they're going to have to cheat. Would they cheat? And also, having this large number of people that are dependent makes the transition to socialism almost self-executing. You end up with a society where more people are dependent than productive. You're pretty close to having a socialist society already, without much incentive for working. Second, the other ulterior motive is to pay off the massive hordes of Democrat contributors, lobbyists, businesses, and I guess you could describe them as the people who live off the government, who suck the government dry. They don't work for businesses or enterprises or charities, or they make their money off your money. Some of them have never done anything else but make their money off your money. Well, like Joe Biden, right? Don't know if he ever had a regular job. But he really was remarkable because he took his government salary for 35 years and became a multimillionaire. Wow, he must be a real financial genius or a big crook. You figure it out. I'll give you some help later. Another ulterior motive is to take care of the Green New Deal climate hysterics. The world, I think it was supposed to end already. I think Gore had it ending in 2010. So we're living on, like now, 11 years of borrowed time, according to Big Al, the kiddies' pal. Boy, thank God he never became president. So we got to satisfy all those hysterics who think the world's going to end, but that really has nothing to do with the world ending. It has to do with they're making millions for all of these surveys and contractors and subcontractors to the subcontractors. Al Gore has made millions and millions off this, to the extent that it has scientific validity, very, very hysterically exaggerated phenomenon, which just go back and see the things they said in the 90s, and you realize that these people are either out of control hysterics or they're very cunning crooks who have built up a vast need and have profited to the tune of millions and millions of dollars having conned you. Big tech monitors us, censors us, deplatforms us. Conservatives have been helpless to do anything about it until now. On Getter, you can talk with friends and family and express your political beliefs without fear of Silicon Valley liberals coming after you. Join Getter, the social media platform that supports free speech and opposes cancel culture. Getter is led by former Trump advisor Jason Miller, who saw what big tech did to President Trump and decided to fight back. Getter is the fastest growing social media platform in history, with over 1.6 million users and growing, including prominent conservatives like Mike Pompeo, Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, and Steve Bannon. Join Getter. It's in the App Store, the Google Play Store, and at Getter.com. Longer posts, longer videos, sharper and clearer pictures, and unlike the Silicon Valley oligarchs, Getter will never sell your data. Send a message today, join Getter. It's time to cancel culture. So the fourth category is to satisfy the make all illegal citizens group, to make all illegal citizens citizens. So they want to basically make anyone in this country a citizen. I don't even know if they have provisions like if you murdered somebody, or I haven't seen it. Basically to make them all citizens, and then, basically carry out the campaign promises of 2020. Invite anyone to come here who wants to come here, give them health care right away, give them welfare right away. In the case of the ones who came in 2020, we shared all the COVID money with them. And then put them on a road to citizenship, which means we'll just basically get anybody that wants to come, and at least for a while, the Democrats can make them dependent and count on their vote. So, this bill, we can see a common thread is to increase the Democratic hold on the federal government, and to move us, like the election bill, to a one-party country, which, by the way, is part of the goal of a socialist country, be a one-party country. And it also does something else that hasn't been emphasized enough, and it's missing something gigantic that I'm surprised hasn't been noted more. What it does is, it makes, without any doubt, the largest investment in the poverty industry ever. It invests trillions in the poverty industry. The poverty industry are the group of people who run all of these poverty programs, which, if they were effective, would have ended poverty 20 years ago. When you consider from the Great Society until last year, we spent trillions to alleviate poverty, and we've got places like Baltimore, inner city, Philadelphia, inner city, Chicago, inner city, Detroit, inner city. I go on and on. A lot of the places where the alleged cheating in the election took place. We've got them as bad or worse, say some of the congressmen, their congressmen, than they were years ago. I remember Elijah Cummings, before he died, saying that his district hadn't gotten better in 30 years. You know how much money was spent in that district in 30 years and it didn't get better? Gee, I wonder what happened to it. Well, in any event, here are the facts. For 50 years, trillions of dollars have been spent to alleviate poverty. The end result is, in the inner cities at least, poverty and the conditions of those inner cities are just as bad or worse than they were when we started. And it doesn't seem like that money reached the people. So now Joe is going to follow it up with laws, about 1 point something trillion already spent in March of this year, a $6 trillion budget that he's proposing, a staggering debt, and then two bills that are being played off against each other. One that started as 1.5 trillion, it's now 1.2 trillion. And the other that started at 6 trillion, it's now 3.5 trillion. We'll call that one the Make America Dependent bill, because that's the one that was called an infrastructure bill, but they kind of had to give up on that. They call it a human infrastructure bill. It's really a vast giveaway plan. So what has happened with these bills? Let's see if we can just organize them so we understand what we're talking about. First, Biden has spent $1.8 trillion more in March of this year for COVID relief. That's on top of the $5 trillion that has already been spent. Then he's proposing another 1.1 trillion, 1.2 trillion for what he calls the real infrastructure bill. And then he's proposing 3.5 trillion for the Make America Dependent bill, which every expert says is gimmicked up with expenditures that are only for 3 years, but they're really going to be for 10, understatements of, well, the end result is that most experts say this will result in about $5 to $6 trillion in money put out on the street, federal expenditures. So those are the things that are up for consideration. Basically, what has happened is it's all come together really well for the Democrats. This is sort of the culmination of Clinton corruption and Obama socialism in a set of bills. The bills are underlined with measures that are all socialist in nature, give money to people. There is no work requirement anywhere in the bill. No workfare, no work requirement. When Clinton said he was going to end welfare as we know it, this bill now has Clinton and all his people starting welfare again as we knew it. Corrupt, not helping the poor, not helping them to get jobs, and letting them be dependent from generation to generation. That's the Clinton contribution. The Obama contribution is Obama Marxism, with the state taking great power away from people, with the state administering just about everything, with the state assuming the powers that get assumed in a country that's going to transition to fascism, socialism, communism, whatever you want, authoritarianism. And for the thousands and thousands and thousands of pages that, as Nancy Pelosi said with regard to the Obama plan, nobody reads until after it's passed. For the thousands and thousands of pages, there's not a single word, much less a provision or section, that provides for accountability. Meaning nobody's going to check on how this money is spent. We're going to put somewhere between $4 and $5 trillion into industry that is well known for its corruption, for its taking the money intended for the poor and taking it for itself and giving it to its relatives, sort of the Clinton plan in Haiti, right? And we're going to put it out without accountability. I mean, that's basically like saying, the hell with any kind of honesty or integrity. We're not even going to make a fig leaf. We're not even going to pretend it's going to be accountable. Can you imagine what's going on in Washington with all the lobbyists and the nonprofit crooks and the business crooks and the guys who live off the government? Man. Boy, if I were Senator Sinema and Senator Manchin, I'd get, well, as you can see with Senator Sinema, I get more protection. I mean, the president thinks that she has Secret Service, but the president doesn't know anything. We know that, right? Whenever he has to speak off the cuff, he makes a total fool out of himself. Basically shows that he's a senile old man that should not be in the White House. So without accountability, without any accountability in this provision, in this bill, how much do you think is going to be stolen and how much do you think is going to get to the people? Now, why don't we take a short break and I'll be right back. How much equity do you have in your home? 50,000, 100,000, more? Cybercrime experts are alerting homeowners that the more equity you have, the greater the chance foreign and domestic criminals will come after you. Title theft is one of the fastest growing crimes. Home Title Lock, America's leader in home title protection, is alerting homeowners they could already be a victim and not know it. Here's how it goes down. First, cyber thieves search hundreds of public databases for high equity homes. Next, they pull your home's title that's online. They forge your signature stating you sold your home, and they take out loans using your equity. You're not covered by insurance, your bank, or common identity theft programs. Protect your most valuable asset. Register your address now to see if you're already a victim and receive a complete title history of your home, a $100 value free. Go to HomeTitleLock.com, that's HomeTitleLock.com. Welcome back, because there's a point I want to make that's quite personal. What we're talking about right now, which is the discovery of the corrupt poverty industry, massive, is the reason, or one of the two reasons I left the Democrat Party. It was 1972, 73. I was investigating a group called the Model Cities Administration. It was a big part of the Lyndon Johnson Make America Dependent bill, known as the Great Society. And gosh, it all sounded good. Help all these poor people, end poverty. And I'm investigating this case, and the guy running it was a big crook. He had a history of being a crook. The city hired him anyway. He did exactly what you thought he would do if you hired him. He stole the money. He passed it out among all the people there. He gave a lot of money to the politicians. I mean, I think we convicted 30, 40 people and put them in jail. And I said to myself, this is a con job. This Democrat Party wants to help the poor as a con job. They want to help Democrats. And of course, in big cities, I'm not talking about Democrats all over the country. I'm talking about the big city crooks. These are decrepit organizations. The Democrat Party in New York is decrepit. If you just don't prosecute it constantly, it goes corrupt again. Same thing in Philadelphia. Same thing in Detroit. Same thing in Chicago. Same thing in Atlanta. Same thing. You know them. They're the ones with the high crime. They're the ones with the mayors who seem to like the criminals more than the victims, and the DAs elected by George Soros' money who put the criminals back out on the street. They're also largely crooked cities from top to bottom. So without any accountability, which the Model Cities Administration and the Great Society programs actually had accountability built into it, which is what we've been using to prosecute these people. But I think that experience, my Model Cities experience, like what I'm going to show you in a few moments, it wasn't isolated just to New York or just to the Model Cities Administration. It was rampant throughout the Great Society program. It's the reason why after 50 years of spending this money, we still have the same decrepit places that Elijah Cummings was complaining about. And we got still, as you will see, the same level of corruption, or at least it's returned. Because once there's a lot of money around, and you've got unaccountable places with one-party control in these cities that are really like dictatorships, you don't have a chance. I mean, why is it that it took the Trump administration for blacks, Hispanics, and other minorities to reach the highest level of employment, the lowest level of unemployment, and the highest wages ever? With all those Democrat presidents who were elected by blacks, it takes a Republican who got something like 8% of the black vote to take them to their highest wages, their highest number of jobs, and their fewest number of people unemployed. So why does it take a Republican, when all these Democrat presidents have been there since the Great Society was put in place? Why does it take a Republican to get blacks, Hispanics, minorities to the highest wages, the most jobs, and the least unemployment. Hope that's disappeared under Biden. And who knows if it's going to get revived. I doubt it when you look at this plan, because this plan is not intended to help people. This plan is intended to help politicians. I mean, just sometimes somebody should do a survey of how many members of Congress started poor or middle class and then retired as millionaires. Or how many are there now who started as poor or middle class and now are millionaires? Or even how about we take a look at their wives and children? You know, the Hunter Biden situation, of which Hunter explains quite exquisitely and in detail in the text from hell, that all of the left-wing censorship people, no, don't show me that text. No, I don't want to see that text. What does it say? For 30 years, Hunter says to his daughter, I've been supporting the family, and they show me no respect. And I hope Pop doesn't require you to give him for those 30 years 50% of everything you get. That may be who knows, that may be like a Democrat formula. You know, the wife gets the money and she pays all the bills, and 50% goes to the boss, if he's the boss. Or the kids get the money, it goes to the boss. I'm not going to put out names, but there's more than a few children, or now adults, of members of Congress and the Senate who were pulling down big amounts of money in questionable countries. Interesting to look at China or Ukraine, not just the Bidens. Well, just in case you think that this is a sort of like a hypothetical, historical problem, just in the nick of time, this Sunday, the New York Times, of all places, and the New York Post, where you would expect it, featured details of the story of Jack A. Brown III. Pretty formidable name, right? Jack A. Brown III. Jack A. Brown, just to summarize quickly him, and we'll go back over it. Jack A. Brown has, since 2017, received for his companies that theoretically care for the homeless and the poor, $352 million. According to both the Times and the Post, they can identify 32 million of it that was diverted to for-profit companies that are owned and controlled by Jack A. Brown III. So he has a non-for-profit that gets $352 million over 17, 18, 19, 20. I don't know if it goes into 21, but over that period of time. And at least 32 million goes into for-profit companies of his, where he is the person who runs the company. And we know, as a matter of record, he takes out a cool $1 million as a salary. But that doesn't tell the story. We'll tell the story in a minute. So this is now another disaster created by the worst mayor in the history of New York City. Is it possible that he's the worst mayor in American history? Could be. Could be. When he went around the country, running for president, he pretty much convinced people of that. In 2017, in his infinite wisdom, Bill, who honeymooned in Cuba and supported the Sandinistas against the United States, he decided in his socialist, communist, kind of limited brain that for-profit companies should not be dealing with homelessness because they were too prone to corruption. Okay, Bill, they were too prone to corruption. So he decided he's going to give all the contracts for homelessness, which amount to billions of dollars, by the way. He's going to give them only to nonprofits, probably because he was impressed with the performance of his wife's nonprofit. which we'll tell you about in a minute. So in 2017, he had all the non-for-profits line up to get these hundreds of millions from the city because they were more altruistic, like his wife's, right? And now we have 4 years of history, right? So how does it work, Bill? Well, it's estimated that the homeless people are now up to a record number of 77,000. That's astounding. That's way beyond what they were in Koch's time, Dinkins' time, my time, Bloomberg's time. Could be double. Could be almost triple. And these non-profit organizations have kind of made a total fool out of them because they've made millions. And they take millions and they divert it to for-profit companies that they own, or their family owns, or their friends own. So de Blasio thought he was getting rid of for-profit companies, but because he's completely lazy, because he is somewhere else than here in this world, and because he never put in a real system of accountability, he basically has the same system he had before, except it's actually more money being diverted now. Because the nonprofit takes an enormous amount of money, and then the for-profits take an enormous amount of money, and there ain't much left for the homeless. How? I just say this now to the people of New York City and the people of Chicago and the people. How do you accept this for so long? Why do you let the Democratic Party con you and make fools out of you? How in Chicago can you put up with 50 years of Democrat rule? I don't know, every weekend, how many kids get killed? When are you going to rise up against it and say, let's get rid of them so they straighten out their party? And you know in the big cities I'm talking about that your Democrat Party machines are crooked. When are you going to get over the brainwashing? Huh? I did when I was 25, 26. I became an independent for a while before I decided on the Republican Party. But the other thing that put me over the top was their appeasement of the Soviet Union and their appeasement of China, which continues today. This is pretty much what goes on with all the rest of them. Not all, but almost all. This is what Joe Biden would be correct if he called this systemic corruption. He's incorrect when he says we're systemically racist. That means most of us are racist. When we say that most of these operators, these poverty millionaires, operate unethically, you'd be correct, according to the Times and the Post. So in 2017, when the city awarded his main company, which is called Core Services Group, their first big multi-million-dollar contract, Black's history of fraud was well known. You didn't have to be like an ace investigator to go find it. In every prior job or business he had, he was accused of fraud. I can't find one where he wasn't accused of fraud. Neither could the reporters. And then just in case that's too much to go through that, the New York State Comptroller in 2012 wrote it out like in headlines. He was seeking a state corrections contract, and the Comptroller of the state of New York wrote that it is going to be denied because of Mr. Brown's, quote, disturbing pattern of fraud. Now, you know, I mentioned one of the problems for de Blasio, and one of the problems is that I think he may have a liking for these nonprofits because his wife has done pretty well in one that nobody's ever explained. That one is called Thrive New York City, and it's done anything else but thrive New York City. It seems maybe to have thrived the people who got the money, including her. For example, she was given $850 million for a mental health program. And Politico report of a few years ago says they largely failed to measure its impact or keep track of spending. Oh, no accountability. Just what they don't have in the Biden Make America Dependent bill. Failed to measure its impact or keep track of spending. There's nothing in this dependent bill, this giveaway bill, for accountability. No workfare. They only served 570 people, and 570 adults, and 190,000 what were described as narcon kids were handed out to hospital where they were put on opioids. And there's no evidence of how many were actually taken care of, what the result was, did it work. The 570 who were offered help, there's no indication of what help was offered, how much money was expended on them. The only thing we know is $850 million was given to the mayor's wife, and then she was renewed. She's going to make a couple $2 billion on this. Not long ago, Mike Lindell, the inventor of MyPillow, and his team fit me for my very own MyPillow. They also introduced me to their wide assortment of other incredible products, like their mattress topper, their sheets, towels, slippers, and more. Sleep is incredibly important to me, and I can assume for all of you. It's time you give MyPillow a try and see for yourself. Listeners have helped build MyPillow into the incredible company it is today, and Mike Lindell wants to give back to all of you. You can get great discounts on MyPillow products by going to mypillow.com right now and seeing each of the specially priced items, including those in the radio listener special square. You're going to see rotational offers up to 66% off on products like their pillows, mattress topper, Giza sheets, but also new products like their slippers, weighted blankets, robes, and waffle blankets. All MyPillow products come with a 60-day money-back guarantee. Enter promo code RUDY for these great specials. That's mypillow.com and use the promo code RUDY. And let me explain to you what he does. He takes in the $352 million, and then he runs these shelters all over the city. But in order to maximize the money he can steal, he has set up for-profit companies that do all the work for the homeless shelters. So he has a company called Procore, and they get the contract for security. During the course of the investigation, the reporters have heard from the residents that often the security guards sleep in the beds and engage in activity that would be considered, I guess, at minimum, sexual harassment. He also owns a company called Flavor Foods, which he created just for this purpose. And they do the catering. And then he has another company called Core Facilities, another for-profit company. And they do the maintenance. He also employs his mother, his sister, his aunt, his niece, and his brother, who gets a six-figure salary. And in 1 year, he spent $460,000 on gym memberships with the money that's supposed to help poor people. Democrat Party is the party that helps poor people, or the party that helps Democrats become rich people. I emphasize, this is not unusual conduct. There are many, many more investigations of this in this program. Some already convicted, or at least indicted, rather. He also spent $420,000 in just 2 years for lobbying. Of course, he's got to smear the politicians, right? At least on the table. Who knows what he does below the table? Now, one of his big supporters, mentioned way down in the article in the New York Times, don't know if it's been mentioned in the Post. It sure as heck hasn't been emphasized. I think it'd have been a headline if it were a Republican. One of the people that he made a big contribution to and got a lot of help from is a person called Eric Adams. He's a Brooklyn Democrat politician, former cop who has gotten an $8,700 contribution from Jack A. Brown. And it appears as if, or maybe we should raise the question, was that the reason why Eric Adams went out of his way in 2017 to convince the residents of Crown Heights that the shelter that Jack A. Brown wanted to build and was going to inhabit was not going to be as bad as they had heard, because the residents, his constituents, had heard not only what a fraud Brown was, but what a horrible shelter he ran. And they were complaining about it, and Adams convinced them they were wrong. Adams says the $8,700 didn't influence him. Who am I to say? Should it be investigated? You're damn right it should be investigated. Will it be investigated in crooked Democrat New York? Of course not. Well, okay, so let's conclude it with, so even though he's getting all this money and giving it to his relatives and it's hundreds of millions, and actually if you go back to 2012, he got something like $520 million from the city and the state. Imagine that. And the guy is found by the comptroller to having a disturbing pattern of fraud. But what kind of job does he do for the homeless? Maybe with all of this, the guy's kind of like a Robin Hood, and he makes sure that the poor people get their fair share. Well, according to dozens of residents that were interviewed, particularly at the Beach House, which was a shelter in Queens, they describe it as overwhelmed by vermin, in terrible disrepair. The food is unedible and unhealthy. It's moldy, and they often use powdered eggs that bring on large bouts of diarrhea and other illnesses. And that's pretty common to the complaints made in other Brown shelters, as well as other shelters run by poverty millionaires like Brown, who live off the money intended for the poor and take it for themselves and their family. I think this is best described not by a politician, not by even a prosecutor or ethical expert. I think it's best described by a woman whose picture is in the New York Times article, who I'd really like to meet, Annabelle Alexander. She lived in, I believe it was the Beach House, just left a little while ago. Only stayed there a while because the conditions were squalid, horrible, inhumane. You get hundreds of millions of dollars to run an inhumane shelter. Sounds like Bidentown, doesn't it? Gosh, these Democrats are kind of like fit a pattern, don't they? Maybe because if you rot at the top, you rot all throughout. You know what Annabelle Alexander described it as? A lot of money is going into this place, but it's not going to us. She just described 50 years of irresponsible, reckless Democrat spending to help the poor. She just described the Great Society program. She just described what's going to happen to the Make America Dependent program. A lot of money is going into this place. Let's just substitute, a lot of money is going into the poor parts of America. But it's not going to us, the poor. Annabelle, you should get an award. Nice, pithy description that takes care of all the bull of all these crooked politicians. It explains in 2 sentences why the inner cities just haven't really improved, even though trillions are spent. And there's no reason why this, 3 trillion, 4 trillion, 5 trillion that Biden is going to put out on the street, there's no reason why that's going to be treated any differently. These guys are licking their lips, getting ready to divert it. Why are they all of a sudden going to change? All of a sudden they're going to become altruistic rather than greedy, slimy crooks who take money from the poor. I don't know how you can live with yourself, but these guys can. A lot of Democrats can. And I imagine there are some Republicans, if they got involved in this, would do the same. But right now, the Democrats can control all these programs. So, in all of the many things that you have to consider with regard to this totally reckless spending that will move us to socialism, gosh, like an express train. Boom. Don't stop, go right to Marxism. Consider the fact that with everything else, this is a massive, massive corruption that's about to happen. It shouldn't happen. It's not going to help the poor. It's going to make their lot in life much, much worse. It's going to create a lot more crooks. It's going to distort our government even more than it's distorted already. And let's just hope that Kristen Sinema and Senator Manchin have the courage to stick with their convictions. I have a feeling they know what I'm saying. I have a feeling they all know what I'm saying. They know what they're voting for. And they know the people who are sitting there with their mouths open and their hands out. They're the people who got them elected. Got them elected in Philadelphia. Crooked. Right? Detroit. Crooked. Atlanta. Crooked. Phoenix. Crooked. Gee, I wonder why I picked those. I could have also added New York, Chicago, a couple of others, but these cities have got to be extracted from Democrat control because they're no longer democratically run governments. They're as if you're in a dictatorship. It's completely controlled by one party. Rights of others are completely stepped all over. And worst thing of all, many, many people become corrupted and take huge amounts of money away from the intended purpose of the money. We can't run a government like that. We're too good for that. So we will keep after this and we'll keep watching it. But remember, when you hear everything else about this ridiculous amount of spending, there's not a single provision for accountability written into the bill. And if it's put in now, it'll be no better than the provisions of accountability that were in the old bills that resulted in all this stealing of trillions that has gone on for 50 years. So thank you very much. Please pay close attention to this. This could really make it or break it for the future of our country. So pay very close attention to this. Get in contact with your senators and your congressmen. Let them know that you understand the game that's being played here. And let them know they're going to pay for making a mistake. Big time. Like they're going to lose their jobs. Thank you, and we'll be back in a few days, and we'll keep on top of this. You know that. And you can count on us to give you the information and the news that you're not going to get from the corrupt mainstream media. For example, like Eric Adams' involvement in this. Thank you very much, and God bless America.